Hi everyone, my name is Kayla and I'm going to be talking today about Chapter 4 of the textbook, Individual Values, Perceptions, and Reactions. This chapter focuses mainly on attitude and going in more depth on what that means. So, attitudes are complexes of beliefs and feelings people have about specific ideas, situations, or other people. So, attitudes are how most people express their feelings. They're formed by values, experiences, and personalities, and they're viewed as reasoning for behaving certain ways towards things. So, if we grow to have a belief about a certain situation, our attitudes are going to reflect how we feel about whatever the object or situation is. Attitudes contain three different components: cognition, which has to do with the brain and knowledge a person has about something; affect, which is that person's feelings towards whatever that is; and then their intention, which is their behavior after they know and they create feelings towards that subject. Something that plays important roles in how attitudes affect our behavior is cognitive dissonance. So, this has to do with when there's an incompatibility or conflict between our behavior and our attitude. In order to cope with this, people will try to sway more one side and use different methods to get through it and figure out what they feel more strongly about. Um, if not, and their beliefs are too strong on both sides, they normally just kind of stick with being content with the dissonance. One thing that the book gave us that I thought was a great example is smoking, because cognitively we know that it's not good for us, but there are so many people who still choose to do it and contradict that belief that they have because they like the behavior. Attitudes are not as set in stone as our personality is. So, new information can change our attitudes on things completely very fast. They can also change when maybe that topic becomes less important or they decide to change their view. So, there are, of course, going to be deeply rooted attitudes that are harder to sway, and we might need a little bit more push in that direction, or just a little more time to completely change our attitude towards something. And of course, those are the ones that we've really held on to for a long time, and we hold those attitudes very strong. So in the workplace, we talk about attitude as job satisfaction. Job satisfaction is caused by many factors, such as the work itself, the pay, and then others' attitudes. Job satisfaction is one of the most commonly studied topics in organizational outcomes because it reflects both our attitudes and our feelings about a job. Okay, now moving on to the second section in our chapter, values and emotions. The first thing we want to talk about is values, which are ways of behaving that are desirable to a certain person or group. So this can mean just different groups hold different values, and sometimes they're based on their religion, where they grew up, their country. Values are different all around the world, and based in different groups of people. So there are several different types of values. The first value is terminal. This is going to be a long-term life goal. So something that you value in your life that you want to aspire to be long-term. Next is going to be the instrumental values, and this is the stepping stone that's going to get you to the terminal values. So anything that is instrumental in getting you to your terminal values, that's going to be the second type. The third type is intrinsic, which is work values, the work itself that it takes to get you to where you want to be. After that is extrinsic, which is the outcome of the work that you're putting in. There are conflicts with values, such as the interpersonal value conflict, which is you're at a conflict with your instrumental and terminal values. So, for example, a person wants to provide for their family, and that's really important for them, but they don't want to spend all of that time in the office away from their family. So that's where those two things start kind of clashing. Next is the interpersonal, which is person versus person. This is where you're going to see some clashes in values with your coworkers, or maybe they're of a different group than you are, and they just hold different values. That's where you're going to start to see those kind of conflicts. Next is going to be individual organization. So this is where employees' values are different than the organization's values, and they're going to have trouble working there due to those issues. The second focus on this area in the chapter is emotions. So emotions are intense short-term physiological, behavioral, and psychological reactions to specific objects, persons, and events. Emotions are short-lived, they're directed at something or someone specifically, and then we experience them ourselves. It's not something we're putting off, it's something that we feel. So they are going to actually create physical reactions in us as well, such as an increased heart rate, or maybe we have adrenaline, things like that. So going off of this, these emotions that we feel are going to lead into our moods, which is a short-term emotional state. And then we can effectively experience moods positive and negatively. So if something happens and our emotions get the best of us and we're upset, that's where we're going to see those negative moods. And then, of course, the other way with if we're experiencing something positive, we're going to be in a good mood for that day. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and get into the third section of our chapter, which is perception in organizations. Perception is when an individual becomes aware of and interprets information. Selective perception would be when someone screens out the information that they're uncomfortable with. Next is the halo effect. This is when someone perceives how someone is and gets their impression from maybe just one thing that that person did. Maybe they did something good, and that's just how they choose to see them. Next is the contrast effect, which is when someone will constantly compare someone else to another person when trying to make their own perceptions of them. The first impression bias is when negative impressions are harder to change than positive. So if someone makes a bad first impression on you, it's pretty hard to come back and change that impression after you already have that. Perception is a major role in how we feel about fairness, justice, and trust. So we will create our beliefs and feelings off of our perception of situations and what we feel is best in that. Organizational fairness, this comes along with perception in the workplace. So employees' perception of organizational events, policies, and practices. Now for the final section in our chapter, stress in organizations. Stress is a person's adaptive response to the demands on him or her. So first, they might be a little bit surprised, a little bit overwhelmed or alarmed at how much they have to do. And then next, they're going to resist those tasks that they need to get done. They're going to feel a little bit of hesitation towards it. And then exhaustion comes at the end of getting it all done, and just kind of resented towards it and just exhausted altogether. So eustress comes with positive events. This is the stress that you might get when you're planning a wedding or something that's exciting at the same time as it is stressful. Next is distress, which is going to be the unpleasant type of stress that many people probably actually call stress, to do with negative events or things that that person probably does not want to do. There are many organizational stressors, but some that the book gave were factors in the workplace, such as busy times that organization has a lot of events, something going on, periods of layoffs when someone thinks that their job may be in jeopardy, and then also mergers with other companies. And like I said, all of this stress can eventually lead to burnout, which is going to be a feeling of exhaustion that comes at the end when that person just feels overwhelmed and they cannot take on anything else for a while. So thank you for watching my video on chapter 4. I hope you found this helpful and you can watch my PowerPoint to go along with it. Thanks.